Hey guys, Tony here at the DirtFish shop. We're finishing up a school car build and we're mounting the skid plate today. So I wanted to show you guys how we do it and a few tips and tricks on what we do to make your life easier. So I've gone ahead and as you can see, I've already done the structure for mounting the skid plate. So I welded in a bar for the skid plate attached to. And I also welded in some nuts here on the subframe. So we have 5 total mounting points for the skid plate. The type of skid plate we use is aluminum. It's a 1/4 inch. You can use 5,000 or 6,000 series aluminum. Cut it to the shape we want, or in some cases, you might have to bend it to clear your oil pan and stuff like that. We're lucky enough on the STI, it actually doesn't need a bend on the school cars, so we just have a flat piece of aluminum. Makes it nice and easy to build and construct and keeps the cost down, things like that. So now that we have a flat piece of aluminum, we need to get it attached to the car. We don't want to start drilling randomly into the skid plate. We actually want to make some transfer punches, put them into the threaded cavities in the car, and then transfer the nut pattern onto the skid plate. So I have some bolts here that I'm going to cut and make into transfer punches, and I'll show you how we do that. So what I like to do is take a bolt and chuck it up super gently into my drill. We don't want to go too hard because it'll hurt the threads. And we'll go over here to the bandsaw and cut off the end of the bolt. All right, so now that we have that cut off, we'll go over to the sander and we're going to sand a point to the end of this bolt, make it like a spike. So that's what it should look like when we're done. Should be a nice sharp edge. If the sharp edge isn't center on the bolt, you can just continue sanding until you're able to get it center. So now we'll take this and we'll thread it into the car. All right, next thing we want to do is get them in there pretty far because the sump guard's going to be up against this. So we want to get it as close to its mounting point as possible. Sometimes you got to turn them with some vice grips a little bit. Okay, now that they're all in there, we want to make sure they're level. That way when we put the sump guard up there, they all touch. Okay, now that all those are level, we can throw our skid plate up here and start getting some punches made onto the skid plate. I like to use spin jacks to hold the skid plate up. That way I'm not holding it over my head and I can align where I want it. If you're doing this on the floor, like on jack stands, you can also use just a regular floor jack. It's a little more awkward. Obviously with the availability of a lift, it's easier to line things up overhead. Now I'll slowly center the skid plate in here. One tip I like to do is I like to tuck it up underneath the bumper skin here, and that helps me hold the front of it. Once I get it center and where I want it, I'll tighten this jack up so it holds it tight up against the subframe. And then I'll do the same thing with the front, and that will hold it tight up against the front mounting bar for the skid plate. Okay, now I just want to double check all the transfer punches are touching the skid plate, which they're not in the back, so we'll go a little tighter here. So now we'll take a rubber mallet. This is a dead blow, and then we'll hit the skid plate where we know the transfer punches are at. One thing to be careful of when you're doing this is you got to make sure you have enough room for your oil pan. So obviously the engine's out of this car. I happen to know there's enough clearance because we've done a few of these. But when you're building one at home, you want to make sure that it's not going to interfere with your oil pan if you're building it with the engine out of the car. So now you can see all these little divots that the transfer punch has made, and that's exactly where I need to drill my holes to mount this onto the car. So we'll take this over to the bench, get some holes drilled on it. So we'll find our punches here. Here's one. And we'll go ahead and make a pilot hole. So we know what size bolts we're using to mount the skid plate. I like to drill the hole a little bit bigger than the bolt hole. That way you get some tolerance in your skid plate. In the chance that you bottom out and the skid plate bends a little bit, you want to have a little bit of give in your bolt hole area. That way you can still get the skid plate on and off without ruining the threads or being too much of a pain. So I'm gonna drill this consecutively bigger. And I'll probably stop at about 1/2 inch. All right, grab the skid plate. Now I actually find the skid plates easier to mount when you're like the car's on jack stands and you're on your back, because you can use your knees to kind of hold the skid plate. Sometimes when they're huge, they get really heavy, things like that. So for all intents and purposes, the car's already on the lift, so I'll just throw it up here. Grab our impact gun here. Slowly and evenly tighten these up. And the skid plate's on and done. This car is ready to rally, except for a motor and a transmission, and it's good to go. So that's how we mount our skid plates here at DirtFish. If you have any questions, comment below, like, subscribe for more content. Thank you.